Good afternoon, everyone. This is our state legislative update panel for the Florida ALHFA Conference. We appreciate everyone who's been attending. We want to thank our sponsors. Lisa is going to just scroll through those, but anytime you see any of our sponsors in person, please thank them. Without them, this conference could not be offered for free, which is what we're able to do with the sponsorship, and we very much appreciate it. Also, many of our sponsors took advantage of the opportunity to have an exhibit in our virtual exhibit hall, which you can visit at FLA, so funny, FLALHFAconference.com. It's in the chat, and on that there's information about the conference, the conference brochure, and other materials, including the exhibit hall. So thanks to that. Lisa, if you could give some of the ground rules and then we'll launch the panel.
Absolutely. So all the participants have been muted at the start of the panel. We will allow for questions. We want to encourage them. Please put them in the chat, and Mark will field those questions as he sees them come up. The conference session is being recorded and will be posted on the Florida ALHFA Conference website, which you'll see the address here. It's also in the chat. If you have any technical issues during the presentation, please feel free to email me at jahed@flhousing.org.
Thank you. I want to welcome today's panel, which is sort of our all-star team for the Sadowski education effort, and also the Sadowski Coalition, which is separate, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We have today Ken Pruitt, former Senate president and the president of the P5 group, who's our lead lobbyist, Sarah Bascom, the president of Bascom Communications, who is the the Bascom Communications is our communications firm that handles our messaging through the legislative session and afterwards between sessions. And Jamie Ross is the president and CEO of the Florida Housing Coalition, and is sort of the de facto leader of that highly disorganized group at times. So want to start it off. Lisa, what do we have up here on this Zoom? I'm sorry.
Sorry, what's that?
I'm sorry, I'm having a live Zoom demo popping up on my screen.
That is all you. Everyone else is all set.
Oh, well, that's a sad thing. There we go. I'm back. Well, Zoom tried to take over my screen, and that's great, and by telling me it was post-session. So thanks everyone for coming today and asking me to look at a demonstration of things they could do. So that's really wonderful. But this past legislative session was a wild ride, from the high of great appropriation a year ago to where we were at the trust fund. And I'd like to first just turn it over to Senator Pruitt to kind of give your observations on what happened and why, and where did we end up in the session.
Well, thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you again, and I appreciate you all taking time to watch this. Whenever I get asked the question, well, how successful has the educational piece for Sadowski been? And we're grateful for ALHFA and for all the resources that they provide, and to our sponsors, we want to thank you very much as well. And I have to say, it's an absolute success. We had for 8 years a governor who never fully funded in his budget Sadowski, and then Governor DeSantis, to his credit, for 3 years now in his budget, he has fully funded Sadowski. Now we know after 2020, even the legislature saw fit to fully fund us. And so we really felt like we had the wind at our backs. Unfortunately, COVID came along, and the governor, he vetoed it because of not knowing what COVID was going to do to the budget. And so the SHIP aspect of Sadowski was vetoed. But for 3 years in a row now, we've had a governor who has been very supportive of housing. We're grateful for that. We had a 2020 legislative session to where we had full funding as well. So we go into the 2021 session, not feeling our oats or anything, but certainly feeling better than what we've had in past session. And of course, we knew that we had a $5.7 billion deficit that the legislature was going to be dealing with. So we knew that there was going to be that obstacle, but we still felt really good that the legislature and as well as the governor were being supportive, knowing that we had our challenges as we move forward on the financial front. And of course, with every new incoming presiding officers, your speaker and your Senate president, they have their priorities. And President Simpson's priority was water, and President Speaker Sprouse's priority was on the resiliency issue. So what they did is they wanted to make sure those were funded. The governor, not only having funded the water issues in the Everglades, but also was a strong proponent of getting the resiliency issue funded, but he had bonded that actually in his budget, but still on the issue itself, he was very supportive. So whenever the House and Senate got together, what happened is they came up with a proposal that would split the Sadowski Fund in 3 different ways. It would give a third of the funds to resiliency, it would give a third for water, and then it would give a third for housing. And at this point in time, remember Sadowski, that the trust fund, the dock stamp revenues, or Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we're in a $420 some odd million range. And so that would have us getting, still a substantial sum. Remember, the average that we've received over the past 5 years has been in the 165 million range. But again, we had been fully funded coming out of the legislative session. So we were obviously shell-shocked. We were disappointed. We knew that both the speaker and the Senate president, because their priorities were built in to this proposal, that it was going to be very, very tough to put the genie back in a bottle and to unwind that. So we started our advocacy, as we have been doing all along. And through a lot of hard work, determination, a lot of providing facts, both to the House and to the Senate, we were fortunate to get the amount that was changed to where Sadowski would get almost half of those funds, and then the remainder would be split up between the resiliency and for the water. I've always been taught in my life that there's a silver lining in everything. And so with the dock stamp revenues, we would be projected to receive about $209 million. And this would be on a recurring basis, but equally important to that was not only that we were going to start receiving a consistent amount of funding based on the dock stamps, but that funding would grow with the dock stamp growth. But as important as anything is, it is now in statute that there would be statutorily no sweeps allowed. So when you really think about it, when you look at the average amount that we've received over the past 5-10 years, you can say that, yes, we're not getting the full amount of dock stamp revenues that were once dedicated to Sadowski, but we are receiving well over $200 million that will grow as the dock stamps grow. But we now have a commitment from the legislature. And remember, you now have not only these presiding officers who will serve another term, but you have 3 sets of presiding officers in the future, speaker and president, who voted for this commitment. So we feel really good, at least for the next 7 years, that those who voted for this commitment will keep that pledge for no sweeps of the Sadowski. So all in all, it's bittersweet. We would love to have had it all, but we're also pragmatic in terms of the legislative process. So all in all, it was a victory for us. We get the recurring increase in the dock stamps. We're getting more money than we have on average than in the past 10 years. And also, most importantly, no more sweeps.
Senator, could you explain what the importance is of it being treated as recurring revenue? It's sort of an inside baseball, but it's really important.
Yeah, that would be like if I had to equate this to education funding, like pre-K through 12 education funding, we don't see the legislature unless there's a huge downturn in the revenues that they would cut that. What is significant about this is that because of the no sweeps language in there, that this is going to be a recurring set of dollars. And we know how difficult the recurring dollars are to get, or for us to be able to get whenever in the legislative process. So it is as big a win as we've ever seen, except for when Sadowski was originally passed. But this is huge for Sadowski moving forward.
Great. So the legislative staff people, when it's recurring, it's sort of like an automatic that it goes into the initial budget. Is that as opposed to they think about it?
Yeah, Mark, with the legislative process, particularly if they have a downturn in the economy, they're going to be looking at cutting recurring. Remember, they had, the state budget, the forecast was about 96 billion. It passed out at 101.5 billion. But remember, when that forecast is made, when we started last session, the legislature for the next 2 years was looking at a $5.7 billion cut to the budget. So what that means for us is that now that the economy has returned and the revenue forecast is in a much more positive mode, what we're excited about is that as these revenues grow, of course, if there is a downturn, we're obviously going to take, a proportional hit like everybody else. So the legislature can do what it wants to. But when they made that commitment for no sweeps, when they made that commitment to make this recurring, that was a commitment that is now in statute. It's literally, figuratively, it's in stone. It doesn't mean that they can't go back and take it back. But I would think that after making this strong commitment, at least for the next 7 years, because of those current and future presiding officers signing that and voting for it, that will be a promise that will be kept.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to ask Sarah kind of an open-ended question. As we move forward, can you kind of review what our communication strategy has been and how it's going to need to, change, and how do you see it moving forward for, our communication strategy?
Sure, absolutely. Do you want me to answer the question or go through my update? I just saw my update.
Do your update and also, lead it to the question too. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. We'll go to the next slide. I don't think I can control. I think Lisa, if you're able to go to the next slide. Hold on, I can see my face over the things. There we are. So for those of you that don't know, in addition to our partners at with Senator Pruitt and his group, we have worked with you all for the better part of Jamie and Mark. I feel like it might be close to 9 years, 10 years at this point. But we are a strategic communications public affairs firm. So when we are not focusing strictly on legislative and advocacy, we then do messaging and crisis. But for what you all, we've been focusing on legislative advocacy. We kind of joke that, we've all been around longer before affordable housing was cool. So now everybody wants to support it. Back in the day, as Jamie and Mark and Senator Pruitt and I know, you had a few that were with us, not necessarily leadership, and as Senator Pruitt mentioned, not the governor. So you guys have come a long way, and we've appreciated being a part of the team. And as Senator Pruitt discussed, we can go through some of the thoughts this session. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind the next slide. I guess I went through all that. Earned, paid media, social, digital, crisis. The good news is, good news or bad news, we've done all of this for you all. So we just recently got into paid media with you all the last, probably I think year and a half or so, Jamie and Mark, and it's really made an impact. So in the past, we would do small box ads on Safety. I remember Jamie, when back in the day when we tried to have smoke coming out of to make sure people saw it was a home. So back then that was having moving animation was a big deal. Now you guys have graduated to the top of Sunburn, which we'll show you here in a few minutes, but we have kicked up a notch and have been able to try to educate and advocate to these lawmakers in a couple different areas. And as Senator Pruitt mentioned, COVID made things a little bit more difficult. I never thought I would enjoy not being allowed into the Capitol. I enjoyed it for a while. Then after a while, it became a little more difficult to do our jobs. So we'll show you some of the things that we had to do to get in there. But this past session was very challenging. In fact, that everything had changed as far as access. So this lists, again, for those of you that don't know who we work for, associations, corporations, coalitions, and then elected leaders and candidates. One of my favorite former clients and elected leader is over here in my left box, President Pruitt. So we've enjoyed doing that type of work as well. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind. So along with that, and I apologize that the actual young lady that works on this and has for, again, probably 8 to 9 years, Kelsey Swithers, is my partner on this account. As Jamie and Senator Pruitt and Mark know, I often say I work for Kelsey. Kelsey is very active in this. This is one of her biggest accounts in as far as just the amount of work that is produced. Senator Pruitt used to always say he cannot believe how many editorials with Jamie's name on them that get printed, or op-eds that favor for us. I would love to say that that is our talent. We are very good at it, but you also have a very welcomed and received message. So editorial boards do not have to meet with us. They do not have to take your op-eds. They do not have to even take our emails when we send it to them, and they have. So you can see here the very, very large amount of editorial boards who have weighed in for you all. Again, in our world, this is not a small feat. And again, that is attested to Jamie, to the conversations, the availability she and Mark have had, and as well as the message that you guys have pushed for many, many years. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind. These are just some editorials and some headlines that you all have seen. Full Sadowski funding and more needed to mitigate affordable housing crisis. These are all recent. Federal and state help needed to avoid a housing crash. Now, I want to explain to you how these get written. These don't, some editorial boards, but they're changing editors constantly. So the reason why these come about is we will send emails from Jamie, or we email and say, would you like to speak to Jamie? And here's the concern. A lot of them are so familiar with you all that they say, we appreciate the request. We know where you are. We know what you need. We know the message, we'll work on it. Others jump at the chance to speak to your advocates on this screen. And again, that is how these come. They don't just come. I'd love to say they sit around and think about us and write on this issue, but it is because of the constant work of Kelsey and Jamie and Mark and Senator Pruitt's group as well. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind. So here's some of the new stuff that we've had to work on in digital. So back in the day, you could go over and we used to drop off packets. Jamie loves the packets. And we would have packets for every single lawmaker. Every piece of information was detailed. It was specific. It had relatable data. We still do that, but you couldn't get in the Capitol this past session. So about a year and a half ago, we had to say, we're going to need some additional revenue and some additional resources for paid media. And thank you to Mark for going to you all and explaining the importance. And that's some of what you see here. So Sunburn, for those of you that sign up for it and receive it, it's a Florida Politics. It is a daily aggregate of original content and news from around the state. They won't tell us how many people they have on their email list. I think that's the secret sauce that they won't share, but I believe it's close to 20. Last time I was able to sneak a number out of them. So that's 20,000. Most importantly, the audience is lawmakers, staff, key decision makers, governor's office, agencies. This is what they read every morning. And what you see on the left side of the screen, these ads are at the very top. So when we purchase them and we place the buy, we say we want to be, I want one finger scroll. So if I have to scroll one more, if I have to go up or down on my phone, that means it's too far down. So you guys are always up at the top. What it also does, as you can see, it takes some of the Miami Herald. So say an article or an opinion editorial is printed in the Herald. The next day, we will then put that article into the Sunburn. So it's a double hit. So think of Sunburn and what these types and these ads are, is a micro-targeted delivery system for lawmakers and key staff. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind. So let's now answer Mark's question that he had asked. So what is it that we're going to do and go forward? So in the past, the message was very simple. Use affordable housing trust fund dollars for affordable housing. It was simple. And then obviously we'd say, don't sweep it. This is where we need the money to go. So now what do we do? Well, I actually think it's even better now. So we can now say, okay, there's no more sweeps. We have a reliable recurring funding. We ended up with more money than we've had in 13 years. So we're going to utilize effective communication for a current legislative environment and players to educate and to advocate. Now, one thing I need you to understand, anything one legislature does, another can undo. So it's not like once this is done, it's done. It's not like, as Senator Pruitt, knows when he was Senate president, they say a current legislature cannot bind a future legislature. Well, they can, just depends upon for how long. So it is very incumbent upon us to continue to have the conversation. Senator Pruitt, and I cannot press enough this point, probably talk to Jamie and Mark and this team more often than we ever did as during this last session, as far as frequency and immediacy and how quickly that happened. So one thing, when we heard that the resiliency and the flood mitigation was going to be funded, we knew this was a project that was coming, but we didn't know where the funding was coming. And then we all quickly realized where the funding was coming from. I cannot reiterate enough the importance of the change that happened after that. It was absolutely, the cake was baked. When we all found out about it, it was once it was announced and it was in a press release. Now, let me be clear. That's not the lack of our ability to infiltrate and get the information. It was kept quiet for a reason, and was even some of the people that were focused on this, they did not even know how it was going to be funded until a press release came out. I'm talking members and chairmen of committees. So that's how tightly held this was. But once it did come out, Jamie and Mark got on the phone with Senator Pruitt. We talked about the numbers. We talked about how some changes need to be made. But then most importantly, so I always say, what's more important, the message or the method of delivery? Well, in this case, it's both. And that's exactly what was successful in this case. So we talked about, we have to make a change, but we're already told this is done deal. So how do we go to them and say, first of all, thank you so much for no more sweeps. We've been asking for that for a very long time. We've been asking for reliable, recurring funding. So thank you very much for what you've done. However, we have a slight tweak that we need you to make. And this tweak is very, very important. Senator Pruitt and Mark and Jamie put pen to paper, immediately got into the governor's office, the president's office, and the speaker's office, I would say within hours. I need you to understand that is not very easy. And that is because of this team that you see here. They went to them respectfully. They understood what was being asked. They understood the change in numbers, what it meant on their end, and what it would mean for affordable housing. And the change was made. And that is no small feat, which puts us to where we are now. A lot of folks right now are going around saying, this is awful, this is ridiculous. We have to undo it. It depends upon who you ask on which message that will come from. I believe our best method is to continue to do what we've been doing, advocate for affordable housing dollars, advocate for reliable recurring funding, something we can depend on, something we can expect, something that we can actually take and turn into an actionable success. And that's where we're going to switch and focus and continue that drumbeat. Lisa, if you could. There we go. End of slideshow. So that is what we appreciate being part of your team. I know Senator Pruitt beat me to the thank yous, but we've enjoyed being a part of your team. We talk all the time. It is a very active education effort. I know sometimes if you don't see it, you probably wonder what is happening with the money we're investing. A lot of Zooms. Jamie likes to have videos on, so we're all very accountable and we all pay attention. But I will tell you that while some people think, wow, what an interesting end to the session from what we've been doing and the way we've seen this evolve, I feel like it's been an evolution that is going to benefit you all. I feel like we're starting from a new place, but a place that gives us more strength and a place that allows us to continue to go from where we are and hopefully make it even better for you all going forward.
Thanks, Sarah. A couple of questions, and I want to go back to Senator Pruitt on one because it's kind of amplifies something that Sarah said. In terms of our ongoing educational effort, could you give our members a feel for how much turnover there is in the legislature every 2 years?
Yeah, that's really a great question, because remember, we're in the term limit where a House member serves 2 years and a senator serves 4 years, but the term limits are 8 years. But the actual reality of it is, if you can think about this for a moment, if you're a legislator coming in, let's say that you've served 4 years and a county commission job opens up, or a congressional seat opens up, a constitutional officer seat opens up. Well, you're likely going to run for that because your amount of time in the legislature, the clock is running. So the average term actually is only 6 years. So what we lack is that institutional knowledge. And every 2 years, you can expect between 20 and 30 legislators coming in and out of the process. Of course, we have reapportionment this year. So that's going to really turn the dial up a lot for legislators exiting and new ones coming in. This education process is a continuum. And I have to applaud Sarah Bascom and her team and Kelsey for the incredible job that they have done in that messaging, because remember, there were over 3,500 bills that were filed in the legislative process last session alone. So we're one of many issues, and to be able to get through all of that is what they do and what they do best. So and what Sarah shared with you is absolutely correct. This tag team that we have, you've got the advocacy of the lobbying part of it, the education part of it, but then you have the messaging part about it, which is providing the education component as well. And of course, everybody knows about Sarah Bascom's reputation. And by having us, join at the hip figuratively, really has paid tremendous dividends for Sadowski. The fact, and I had to smile whenever she was saying that, when a press release comes out, she should know when a press release comes out, it's pretty well baked when it's coming from the two leaders, from the speaker and from the Senate president, and trying to unwind all that really to her and to Kelsey and Jamie and Mark really is a show of their strength and ability to get through all the clutter and get the message through.
Yeah, thanks. And just again, to emphasize, the initial proposal that came out, which really was probably the final proposal in many people's minds, that it was just the way it was going to be, would have put housing on a recurring basis, but only at around 140 million with some growth. But that would have been our appropriation level where we started. And after the work that was done kind of quietly after that, the leadership announced on their own that they were going to change the formula so that housing, came in at 209 million. So that's a significant increase. And as doc stamps grow, that 209 will grow. Sarah, real quickly, could you just speak to the strategy that we used of sort of, thanking at the same time that we kind of pushed a little, as opposed to a strategy where you just sort of, went to the mattresses, as they would say in The Godfather, and start firing away?
Sure, absolutely. So what we did was a lot of behind the scenes convincing. So we spoke very closely and very continually with the governor's office, speaker's office, and president's office. And we were given, in fact, when they called and said this is what they were doing, they called and said, hey, where's the thank you? And we paused and went, I'm sorry, like, give us a second. Like, we're not ready to thank you yet. We kind of need to understand what this means. But they literally said, all right, in fact, I got a text, Bascom, where's the ticker tape parade? And I said, well, yeah, we're going to work on, let's talk about the parade in a minute. But we had to kind of look at it to see where it is. But once we realized very quickly, we had behind the scenes conversation, very respectful, hey, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for the no sweeps. We just need a little bit of this. And we have some questions here. And they made the changes. But afterwards, we were then told, okay, can you thank us? I'm telling you, they think they did affordable housing and Sadowski a favor. They feel like they said, you don't have to come to us every year and beg us not to sweep. You don't have to come to us every year and say, fund affordable housing via the trust fund. It's now going to be done. So you can go out and you can make a lot of noise and you can try to threaten. Senator Pruitt and I have been in this way longer than we'd love to tell you. It doesn't work. It simply does not. They will dig in, they will fight back, and they will make it worse. I know that doesn't sound wonderful for a representative government, but it's just the way it is. So what we did is we did more bees with honey, and we were in a better position. And I think we will be in a better position going forward because of the very methodical, very strategic approach that was probably about 4 people on the cell phones with 4 people. And as Senator Pruitt would tell you, when it comes to legislature, I'd say about 5 people make the rules. 5 people make the decisions. Then you've got staff. So you can go out and come in, as Mark said, if you can come in like a wrecking ball, you're going to leave with nothing. So it was a very strategic, very respectful, and very methodical goal. And I will tell you, on this call, sometimes we were all like, no, we want to go in. This is not what we want. We don't like that they did this. We don't like that we didn't know. We didn't like that affordable housing advocates weren't consulted. But then we realized, okay, we have one goal, and that is to fund affordable housing through the trust fund to make sure we can get as much dependable, reliable revenue as possible. So let's focus on the end goal, and then let's figure out how to get there. And in this case, it was very strategic, very quiet, but it was also very impactful.
Right. Thank you. Jamie, I'll turn to you. You can share any of the thoughts you'd like on the session or going forward, but one thing I would like you to talk about is there's all these Sadowski named groups. I mean, for someone that a few years ago, a lot of legislators didn't know who it was. It's pretty well known now, at least Sadowski has something to do with housing, but there's a Sadowski coalition and there's Sadowski affiliates and there's the Sadowski education effort. Could you kind of sort that out?
Yeah. And I think it's important to do that. I guess maybe more so because of this past session and what's going on now than ever before. So I'm the facilitator of the Sadowski Coalition. That's not like my day job. My day job, I'm the CEO of the Florida Housing Coalition, the logo you see by my head. The Florida Housing Coalition is a nonprofit that does training and technical assistance. We're only one member of the Sadowski Coalition, but the Sadowski Coalition right now has 32 statewide organizations. Well, let me get to that. I initiated the Sadowski Coalition in the summer of 1991 when I was working actually for 1,000 Friends of Florida. I saw that the local governments, they wanted this local option passed, and it kept getting torn down by the builders and the realtors. And the state at that time, Mark was running the Florida Housing Finance Agency, which is now known as the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. They wanted a dedicated revenue source for sale. Basically what I did, I was a new person in town. Nobody knew who I was. Why in the world was 1,000 Friends of Florida even interested in housing? I asked all these groups, there was 11 of them, to come together so that they could hammer out a compromise bill. And that became known as the Sadowski Act. And quite frankly, we really didn't do any lobbying for the 10 years after the act was passed. There was no need. All the money that was put into the trust funds was appropriated out. Then, but in 2002, we needed advocacy for a variety of things. And the Sadowski Coalition grew and to the point where it became 32 statewide organizations ultimately. But the Sadowski Coalition is not a corporate body. It is not incorporated. There's no board, there's no staff. It's just me facilitating the groups, reminding them we only agree on one thing, and that's using all the housing trust fund monies for housing, because people bring other issues up. Hey, maybe the Sadowski Coalition should advocate for this or that. And I'm sort of like the guard. No, we disagree on just about everything else. It's a really diverse coalition. It's got, legal services in the Chamber of Commerce. It's got local governments and builders. So, we're just about using all the housing trust funds for housing. So that's the Sadowski Coalition. And quite frankly, there was never any problem. We were always staying on the same page until this session. And when Sarah just showed the screen with the very important, she said, when are we going to thank you? When are they going to thank us? And you said that thank you. And if you look closely, you'll see it doesn't say Sadowski Coalition. So what it says is Sadowski affiliates. Why? Because the Sadowski Coalition is this group that only speaks with one voice unanimously, and we're not unanimous in this. The Florida Realtors, which has been an incredibly important member of the Sadowski Coalition, they led the charge to scrap the cap years ago. If those of you remember that, when there was a cap on the trust funds, they did not join in everything that Sarah just said, what we did during this session. Okay, theirs was more we hate Senate Bill 2512. Well, I didn't like Senate Bill 2512 either, to be honest with you. But my goodness, I'd never, in all the time I've been working these issues, I've never seen a joint press release from the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, which really came out early in the session, which basically said, we aren't going to do things like we've done it in the past. We're not going to go into conference and we'll negotiate. We're agreeing with each other right now, right here. This is what we're doing. So again, as Senator Pruitt and Sarah are saying, it's pragmatic, it's reality, right? I mean, we could stomp around all we want. This was it. And a huge improvement was made. We went from 1/3 of the funding to 1/2 of the funding. And of course, that was more money than we've actually received because so much of it has been swept in many, many years. So that's the Sadowski Coalition. The Sadowski Coalition is that original coalition that's grown, but quite frankly, in a way doesn't exist anymore because the realtors are not part of it. And so you could say, well, I don't know, can they leave the coalition? And then there still is a Sadowski Coalition. Quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, that's all very unclear to me right now. But some years ago, we started something called Sadowski Affiliates at the Florida Housing Coalition, my organization that does training and technical assistance. And we did it because so many people wanted to become a member of the Sadowski Coalition. And I said, you can't be a member of the Sadowski Coalition. You have to be a statewide organization. You have to have a lobbyist in Tallahassee. And this has to be a priority issue. So they weren't statewide organizations. They didn't have lobbyists in Tallahassee. So we started this thing called Sadowski Affiliates. And we realized how important it was because one of the most important things you can do for education is meet with legislators at home in their district office. By starting a Sadowski Affiliates, we have thousands of members of the Sadowski Affiliates, and we do educational webinars for them. And we have Mark and Senator Pruitt and Sarah Bascom and others on those webinars. We keep everybody apprised, and we're always giving them the talking points and whatever to meet with their legislators. So it is also a educational effort, but it's nothing like the Sadowski education effort. So the Sadowski education effort is what's funded by Florida ALHFA. Sadowski education effort is what pays our incredible professionals, not me. I'm not on that paid team. That's the P5 team, Senator Pruitt and his staff, and it's the Bascom communications team, Sarah and her staff, okay? That's the Sadowski education effort that with Mark, is funded by ALHFA. Everything that Senator Pruitt and Sarah Bascom said about what happened this session couldn't be more right on. I don't believe there was anything more important than the Sadowski education effort to get that change from 1/3 of the funds to 50% of the funds. So it's also important that, again, I'm a big believer in, people need to meet with their legislators at home. And I know I'm looking at the folks who are on this line. I see Harry Hedges' name. I know that Harry Hedges meets with every legislator he can whenever he can. So I know, and I imagine other members of ALHFA do the same. And that is super important. So the difference, by the way, that's not me. I do have crazy dogs, but that's not me. So there's 3 different entities: Sadowski Coalition. Again, nobody pays any money for the Sadowski. I didn't say that before. There's no membership dues in the Sadowski Coalition. It's a collection of organizations speaking with one voice. Right now, not so much. Then there's the Sadowski Affiliates. That's a program of the Florida Housing Coalition, and it's underwritten by Wells Fargo. So I actually get funding Wells Fargo to do my Sadowski Affiliates work. It was originally funded by Chase. Now it's funded by Wells Fargo. And then there's the Sadowski education effort, which is really the professional team that I thank God we have. So does that answer that question enough there?
Sure, it does. And I think it's important, again, for our membership to know that we control, Florida ALHFA controls the name Sadowski Education Effort. It is a registered fictitious name of the Florida ALHFA. So, we can use it. And when it came time to run the thank you ads in Sunburn, when we had, the realtors were, adamant that we not say thank you for the no sweeps language. So the Florida, the Sadowski Coalition couldn't do that. We used the Sadowski Education Effort, and that's the logo that we utilized in running those ads. So
right. I'm sorry. I said Sadowski Affiliates. It was a Sadowski education effort. And I'd like to add one more thing, Mark, about the importance of meeting with legislators and that shout out I gave for Harry and others on the board and our Sadowski Affiliates. Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which has always been a member of the Sadowski Coalition, from the beginning and now. They spend their summers driving around the state. I know Stephanie Sutton, she's been driving around the state, meeting with legislators in their district offices. So that is just super important.
Yeah, and a thank you and to Florida ALHFA members out there. The board of Florida ALHFA considers these legislative matters fairly often, but they have a legislative committee of Harry Hedges and Catherine Driver and Jim Ryan. So a big thank you to those 3 who all did a lot of outreach, and also, I could turn to for guidance on, and when we would have strategic decisions to make. Well, that kind of leads to what is in some sense ultimately going to be the elephant in the room a little bit, which is that we've described this divergent strategy that was utilized, where we went low key, and we think it was very successful because we ended up with no sweeps and an appropriation that should be fairly automatic. That's more than we got since 2007 or 8. So yeah, it was nowhere near the theoretical appropriation we thought we should be getting, but it was more than what we really had been getting. So we thought at the end of the day, we really got out of Dodge, really well and positioned well to move forward. But the divergent strategy is come to the point where the Florida realtors, who were sort of like, nope, we just can't go this route. And again, as Jamie said, the realtors have been massive supporters over the years of Sadowski and affordable housing. So this isn't a throw the realtors under the bus. It's a different strategy, and it's not our strategy. And without them over the years, we would have never passed this bill in the first place or kept Sadowski. But right now they're going down a path where they've said, nope, we are going to propose and try to get on the ballot a constitutional amendment. And Lisa, if you could pop the text of that amendment up on the screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't have that available.
Okay. Well, it's a secret amendment. So
Try to locate it.
Lisa, if you want, if you allow, well, maybe it's faster for you to do that. I was gonna say I could bring it up, but I'm so technologically not as
well,
good as
it'll
you.
be posted for everyone with my materials and Sarah's and other, for this session. So let me just kind of go through what's in this proposed amendment. It basically is saying we are going to use the Constitution to override what the legislature has done. And we are going to mandate in the Constitution, if this passed, that 25% of doc stamps be dedicated and go into the state and local housing trust funds. So there we go. So if you could go down just a little bit on that, thank you. That's good. So, okay, as housing advocates, the immediate reaction some have is, wow, that would be really great. We get 25% of doc stamps. But there are some real issues with this, and they go to some of the fundamental deals that have been made over the years. If you could scroll down just a little bit more, Lisa, there's a really important part of this. There you go. You see at the bottom there, it says at least 65% of the funds must address affordable housing access and availability through programs related to the next page. If you could scroll down, purchase of affordable housing. Wow. Well, one of the things that Jamie has done over the years to keep everybody together in our advocacy is that we made a series of deals early on that basically said, we're going to have between the state and local trust funds a 50-50 split between rental and home ownership, because there are very strong groups on both sides. There's need on both sides. And yes, SHIP is going to be 65% oriented towards home ownership. And that's the bigger program. But what Florida Housing gets, even though it's less money, is almost all for rental through the sale program. And you put it all together and you get roughly a 50-50. But really important, the 65% for SHIP that has to go to home ownership is not just purchasing homes. It includes the rehabilitation of owner-occupied homes counts towards that 65%. So right now, in SHIP, when you repair Grandma Jones's roof or put a wheelchair ramp and retrofit in an elderly low-income homeowner's house, that counts towards the 65. In this amendment, it wouldn't. In this amendment, the only thing that counts towards the 65% of all the money, not just SHIP, is purchasing homes. So rental housing, homelessness, home repairs for the elderly, anything else takes a whack in this distribution, in this formula. If you could go back up then a little higher again, Lisa. Okay, that'll work. You'll see that under C, it says funds may be expended only to address affordable housing access and availability, including is is not an exclusive. It's just examples. And so they've written language that says you can spend money for housing access and availability. Welcome to the lawsuit that'll go on for 5 years. Sarah, did you have something you want to add on that? Or, yeah, okay, you're just waving there. Okay, good. So, what's that mean? And it is very important also to note that when the realtors were drafting this, they did not share their language or their strategy with anybody else in the Sadowski Coalition. So, our point is not to be, beat up on the realtors, but we've got some really significant issues with this amendment in terms of how it substantively was drafted. It also, one of the claims that would be put out is this is just restoring what was there before Senate Bill 2512. I'm not really a math anything. I'm an arithmetic nerd, and that's just not true. The way they've written this, it takes 25% of all doc stamps to housing. What was in the current law before 2512 is that about 24% of doc stamps after you took out the 1.1 billion for the environmental went to housing. So when you put the new formula in place, it's not restoring, it is significantly increasing. So you're taking money that even under the old distribution was going to general revenue and moving it to housing. And that means somebody who's getting funded with general revenue is taking a hit with this amendment. And I would, welcome anybody else who wants to speak to it. But clearly we think from a political standpoint, this is not well received by the leadership of the legislature. And if anybody, and I'll be happy. And also if anybody has any questions, we'd like to get to them. So you could type them in the chat, but if anybody on the panel has anything to add on the constitutional amendment, this would be a good time to do so.
Well, this has nothing to do with housing, but I personally don't think you should budget in the Constitution, regardless. I don't, just philosophically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's.
I couldn't have voted. I couldn't wait to vote for the constitutional amendment to restore felons' voting rights. That's definitely the stuff of a constitution, civil rights. But I don't understand budgeting in a constitution. I was with Thousand Friends of Florida when they started out on Amendment 1. Nobody consulted me. I was the Affordable Housing Director, and it had a lot to do with why I left. And I became the CEO of the Florida Housing Coalition in 2015.
Go ahead. Sorry, Jamie.
Sorry, that's it.
Sarah, you had something you wanted to add?
Well, and I think Senator Pruitt would probably echo this. The legislature does not take very kindly to putting laws like this into the Constitution. As Jamie said, the basic governing document of the state. If you're putting things like this in there, it ties their hands. Now, unfortunately, nowadays, and let me tell you, constitutional amendments is big business. There are companies out there and consultants that do nothing but run amendments, either good, indifferent, or take stuff out. But I think that's also the situation to where we've had to field a few phone calls. I know Senator Pruitt got them as well, that said, is it true you all, meaning the group on this Zoom, are behind that constitutional amendment? So you're already getting incoming leaders saying, who is it that's trying to bind this? And keep in mind, the devil's always going to be in the details. So whether or not, as Mark says, the amendment does what happens, but then there's an implementing bill. So after this passes, then the legislature is the one that has to interpret the intent and then write the implementing bill. So can you imagine being the one to write an implementing bill for an amendment if it passes that the legislature did not want? So it's an uphill battle. It's a very expensive battle. It has to be over 60%. I know Senator Pruitt was in the legislature when that passed, and that was the legislature's intent, not to make it to where If you couldn't pass legislation, you go straight to the Constitution. Now I will tell you, I am with Jamie on that. I've worked for constitutional amendments. I've worked against them. I think in some cases, my personal philosophical of absolutely no, doesn't go in the Constitution. I used to have a very hard line on that. Now it just depends, because sometimes you can't get anything done the other way. But I'm 100% agree with Jamie, and I think legislatures are as well, appropriating, setting up something in the Constitution that guarantees some type of funding does not take into account legislative changes. I don't know if Senator Pruitt has anything different, since unlike the rest of us, we just pretend to know what we're doing. He's actually done it in there.
Well, Sarah, thank you. We never liked it, particularly on the appropriation side of it. You have a 75-word directive that comes to the legislature, but really all we need to do is to go to the amendment that Jamie's talking about. That's the land acquisition one that passed, and it's still in the courts. And the legislature, the way that they implemented that, to your point, Sarah, when they wrote the implementing bill, you had those who were successful in getting that on the ballot and passing it. They didn't like what the legislature did, and so now they're suing the legislature. And so at the end of the day, the best course of action is try to work with the legislature as much as you can. And that's why on this issue that we're talking about, where we ended up, no, we didn't get the full loaf, but we got a whole lot more than what we've had in the past. And the legislature is a body of compromise. I'm not talking about philosophical compromise. I'm talking about it's a compromise of, those ideas that come forward and issues that come forward to try to find a middle ground. And this is going to be a quagmire if in fact it is able to get the 60%, because the legislature, like it or not, will always have pretty much the last say unless the courts deem otherwise.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. And yeah. And just, again, to emphasize that, from the importance too of this, within the Sadowski coalition, we have, one of the ways it's held together is because people have respected that those initial, the deals that were made on how the money gets split among the different, types of expenditure, so much for very low income, so much for low, so much for moderate, so much for rental, home ownership, construction. Well, when the home builders take a look at this amendment, they see that there's nothing in this amendment that mandates that SHIP get a penny. And therefore, there's nothing in here that guarantees that there's construction activity. I mean, this amendment could maybe, if it, fund a gigantic down payment assistance program and then, sewer and roads. That's one reading of it. It may not be the intended one, but it's definitely what we're trying to say to the membership here is that take a look more than just the headline of, we're protecting, or this is somehow protecting affordable housing. We think that the route that we're going is a more realistic one. And even if this amendment passed, we have no confidence whatsoever that it would result in what we would want to see in terms of how housing money was appropriated. One last chance for anybody in the chat. I know there's a request for a flow chart. I will follow up with that and make sure we provide something that that would meet that. We will be posting. We have not posted yet, but we will be, any presentation that's come that Lisa has, we'll be posting to the conference website, and then ultimately all of these sessions will be recorded, and the presentations will be there as well, and they'll all migrate over to our permanent website, floridaalpha.com, FLALHFA.com, and will be there for you or people who couldn't make it today to review over the next few days or next few months or the next year. All of these sessions and the handouts will be available. So we got let's make sure one here. Um, Great. We have a comment that this gave a lot of clarity, and hopefully it did. If anybody thinks of any questions on or has any thoughts on our legislative strategy moving forward, or as it deals with the constitutional amendment, I will note for the record that the Florida Alpha Legislative Committee has taken a position that we do not support the constitutional amendment. And it's while we love funding affordable housing and we live for that, we think it's poorly drafted and bad politics as well. So I want to thank Jamie, Sarah, and Senator Pruitt so much for everything that you do for Florida Alpha, and we'll be plowing ahead towards the 2022 session. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Florida Alpha.